Hi everyone, my name is Paul, this is Exposure Therapy, and in this video I'll demonstrate how Adobe Lightroom Classic can help you select your next prime lens. Most of the students that attend my photography workshops bring gear purchased as part of a bundle or kit marketed towards beginners. The kits typically include basic DSLR or mirrorless cameras and a zoom lens with an 18 to 55 or 16 to 50 millimeter equivalents, which varies depending on the camera make. Some kits include a 75 to 300 millimeter lens for greater reach, but these are rarer. When the workshops transition to the topic of aperture and depth of field, some students realize that their basic zoom lenses can't achieve the shallow depth of field aesthetic they desire. This is followed by requests for me to recommend a large aperture prime lens, which inevitably leads to a discussion about how to choose a useful focal length. And so I ask probing questions about their preferred subject matter, style, working distance, budget, etc., all in an attempt to glean the ideal focal length for each student. This line of inquiry is common, but it's also problematic because it assumes beginners can provide accurate answers to questions and concepts that they've likely never really carefully considered up to this point. Is there a better way? There is, but I'll need access to your computer for that. If you take every picture a photographer has shot on a zoom lens and sort the results by the focal lengths they've used, you'll find an uneven distribution of images among them. Some of them will have a greater share of the total number of pictures than others. Barring a few exceptions, I propose that the focal lengths with the greatest share of the total, the plurality, is the ideal focal length for that photographer's next prime lens. Adobe Lightroom Classic, emphasis on the Classic as this can't be done in their simplified version, has a function that lets you filter your entire catalog or selection of photos by a variety of metadata attributes, including by set focal length. When you activate the focal length attribute, the application displays a list of every focal length you've used to take the selected images, along with the total number of photos shot using those focal lengths. My theory is that the focal lengths with a comparatively larger share of photos are evidence of a preference and can serve as a starting point for picking your next no regrets prime lens. Now I'll demonstrate the process. Alright, so what I'm going to do is demonstrate how this is done using my own personal photos. So what we'll do is shrink down this picture of me to my desktop and open up Adobe Lightroom Classic. Here are some personal photos I already have in here. Oh, look, Mexico. The key is you have to activate the Filters tab by pushing the backslash key on your keyboard. And when you do that, you get an opening here that looks like this. Make sure to select metadata up top instead of attributes or text. So we'll go by metadata, deselect text and attributes. I'm going to select all dates and I'm going to limit my filter, my library filter, to my two Fujifilm cameras, which are the X Pro 2 and XT2. They're the current system that I use. I'll also be refining the search to exclusively filter based on my zoom lenses, as I suggested, and that's going to be done over here. The XF 10 to 24, the XF 16 to 55, and the 50 to 140 millimeter lenses. Those are my only three zoom lenses. As you can see, the majority of my lenses are fixed focal lengths. And this column right here currently is set to aperture. Let's change that to focal length. We select focal length and now there you go. Adobe has filtered everything down to the individual set focal lengths of these zoom lenses. And the focal length is displayed here on the left, and the number of photos out of all of the photos that are being filtered is shown here in the dark gray text, the dark gray numbers. And that's it. You just go over your pictures and you see how many photos you have at any particular focal length. And then you kind of start developing an idea of what your preferences are. The first and most obvious limitation of the method is that it requires Adobe Lightroom Classic. The so-called modernized version of Adobe Lightroom, the one available on both desktop and mobile platforms, can't filter metadata by lens type or focal length. On a side note, I firmly recommend Adobe Lightroom Classic over Lightroom Not Classic. I've also confirmed that both Apple Photos and Google Photos don't allow filtering pictures by set focal length, despite their ability to read and display the data in question. I can't comment about performing this type of analysis using other applications such as Capture One Pro, Photo Mechanic, etc., simply because I neither own nor use them, so sorry. Secondly, it's important to understand that both the upper and lower limits of your zoom's focal length range can own a greater share of the distribution. This isn't necessarily because you prefer these focal lengths, but more so because they're the hard limit of the lens. So for example, if my lens tops out at 55 millimeters, but I want a bigger rendition of the subject, I'm going to have to settle on 55 millimeters despite wanting more. There's simply no further it can go. Lastly, this analysis is limited to the focal length range of your existing zoom lenses. However, since the point of this method is to guide you towards a preferred focal length from amongst those that you use, this limitation is largely moot. I firmly believe that it's more practical for beginners to expand their collection of zoom lenses before committing to fixed focal length prime lenses. The ultimate point of this exercise is to engage in due diligence and photographic introspection so that you can avoid buyer's remorse. And there you have it, an easy way to use Adobe Lightroom Classic to help you choose your next prime lens based on the focal lengths that you use most often. If you have requests for future topics, let me know in the comments and I'll address them in future videos. In the meantime, you can learn more about photography on exposuretherapy.ca. See you next time.